Enology, a science not offered here at UAB. However, it's probably a class most of us college students would love to take. Enology comes from the Greek word for wine and study, and it is used to describe the wonderful science of winemaking. The process of winemaking is a very detailed and refined process that dates back thousands of years. In order to better appreciate wine, you need to know four basic things: its history, what it contains, how it is made, and the ideal conditions for producing the wine grapes. The history of wine most likely has its origins in the Middle East. There is evidence of the most widely used wine grape, Vitis vinifera, being cultivated there since around 4000 BC. As a matter of fact, there are Egyptian records dating from 2500 BC that refer to the use of winemaking, as well as many references to wine in the Old Testament of the Bible. Wine was traded by the Greeks as well as the Romans. Both cultures celebrated wine with the god of wine, Dionysus in Greece and Bacchus in Rome. The god had two sides to his personality, one side joy and ecstasy, the other brutal unthinking rage. The two sides of the god reflect the two sides of wine's nature. Spanish missionaries in South America, British settlers in Australia and New Zealand, as well as Dutch settlers in South Africa traded wine. The rise of the Christian Mass helped preserve the wine lands after the fall of the Roman Empire. The monastic orders preserved and further developed many of the highly regarded wine-producing areas in Europe. However, the wine as we know it in its aged form was not drunk until the 17th century with the development of the bottle and cork. The basic component of wine is the grapes. It is made from the fermented juice of these grapes. During the fermentation process, yeast is added, usually along with sulfur dioxide to suppress wild yeast and unwanted organisms from growing, and then sealed in vats for several weeks. It is then drawn and put into another vat for the second fermentation called aging. The length of the aging process depends on the wine variety. The juice from the grapes in red wine is called must. The fermentation process of the must is what creates the alcoholic content of the wine. There are 5 general steps in winemaking. First, cleaning the grapes. Once they're transported to the winery, the grapes are treated with sulfur dioxide in a process called sulfating. This process kills any unwanted microorganisms and wild yeast species that may be living on the wine grapes. The second step is pressing the grapes. With white wines, the grapes are pressed for about 2 hours and then put into tanks so that they can chill and the excess sediment can drop to the bottom to later be removed. In red wines, the must is created by putting the grapes in a crusher destemmer, turning it into a pulpy material. Then it is put into fermenting bins to cold soak for a few days. This allows the juice to gain color and fruit flavor. More sulfur dioxide is then added to kill any microorganisms that may have been missed by the first sulfation. The third step is fermentation. With white wines, the juice is put in fermentation vats and yeast is added. It takes about 10 to 30 days to complete this fermentation process. During this time, it is important to keep the juice at a constant temperature of around 25 degrees Celsius to not kill the yeast. Certain types of white wines are fermented in ways to give them distinct flavors. For example, Chardonnay is placed in oak barrels to ferment, therefore the oaky flavor comes out in the final product of the wine. With red wines, after cold soaking, the yeast is added. The carbon dioxide produced by the fermentation pushes the skins to the top of the tank, making a cap on the liquid. This cap gives the juice color and tannins. The tannins are chemicals that naturally exist in the skin of the grapes. They are an excellent antioxidant and they cause the dry taste of red wines. On average, it takes around 10 to 14 days for red wines to ferment. Some musts with higher sugar concentration can take months. The fourth step is aging. This is defined as the time between fermentation and drinking. With white wines, many are not aged for long. Some more complex whites can be aged from around 3 to 7 years, though. Red wines are put in redwood or oak barrels to age. The components of the wine form to enhance flavor and aroma. The wood also contributes to the flavor. Red wines can be aged for several months to several years, depending on the type and quality of wine. A common misconception about wine is that wine must be aged. While some do in fact improve with age, some should be drunk immediately. If wines are aged for too long, the tannins that give the wine the flavor will precipitate out, causing the wine to go over the hill. The fifth and final step is separation, chilling, and bottling. After fermenting white wines, they're drawn off to separate it from the dead yeast cells and other sediments in the juice. The wine is then chilled to create more clarification and then is bottled and shipped to the consumer. Red wine is removed from the barrels after aging and then bottled and corked and sent to the consumer. The ideal conditions for producing wine grapes depend highly on the geology and the climate of the area. In areas such as Napa Valley, the geology is good because of the soil there. It's been created over many thousands of years after being underwater, drying out, and having the process repeated. The rare diversity of microclimates in that area also creates ideal conditions for producing wine grapes. The area in which wine grapes are grown influences the type of wine it can become. For example, Germany produces the best Rieslings, while California produces the best Chardonnays and my favorites, Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Noir. The climate plays a big factor because grapes are primarily temperate zone plants. However, they can be grown in semi-tropical areas. Good wine grapes are grown in warm days and cool nights. In order for successful growth to occur, heat summation of about 1800 degrees is required. In conclusion, the process of winemaking is a very detailed and refined process that dates back thousands of years. The 4 things to know to better appreciate wine are: number 1, its history, that wine has been drunk for thousands of years. The grape type Vitis vinifera is the grape of choice and has been almost exclusively used in its production since the beginning. Number 2, what it's made from, the combination of grape juice and reds called must, the yeast, and the sulfur dioxide that is added in the fermentation process to kill any unwanted microorganisms. Number 3, how it is made, which is the 5 steps: cleaning the grapes, pressing the grapes, fermentation, aging, and then bottling. Remember that these 5 steps differ between white wines and red wines. Then finally, the step 5 is the ideal conditions for the wine grapes. Remembering that the geology and the climate, along with the area in which it's produced, reflects the type of wine it will become, and that certain conditions, climates, temperatures, and soil create different flavors and types of wine. I hope that from all this you now have a better understanding of wine and the long process that it takes to make it, and that the next time you sit down and have a glass, you can fully appreciate how far it's come and just how lucky you are to have a glass in front of you.